there is nothing, and this may cause some controversial discussions for you later on, there is nothing like a war on terrorism which implicates that the law of war or martial law replaces the rule of law. We should never give up our legal standards, thus giving in to the terrorist goals. Terrorists are criminals, and it should be avoided to give them a special status that might enhance their prestige in public, either turning them to monsters, they're not monsters, or to freedom fighters. I don't want to touch, well, first, may I make some restrictions on what I say. If terrorism is a part of a civil war, where governments have to defend themselves against military armed active groups. Of course, military means have to be used. I may now talk about the terrorism you still find in the southern part of the Philippines or in the southern part of Thailand, where you really find military attacks, especially in the Philippines, of course. Then you have to use military forces. But this is, from my opinion, a civil war. It's already a civil war. All the other forms of terrorism are a crime and have to be prosecuted as a crime. And of course, if you have terrorist groups existing in Afghanistan, backing up military forces over there, you have to use military force. This is something else. But any other form of terrorism, and I include the terrorism that existed in this country with the horrible two Bali bombings, with the bombings of the Marriott and the Australian embassy, that is crime. And even at this moment, I have to touch the very delicate subject of the role of the military in combating terrorism. But concerning the prosecution, it should be clear that there's no space for military action. You might think of a military support in prosecutions in very specific cases, like delivering aerial photography, which we did in our country to find specific photographs of a big area to find out if anything has been digged there or something like that, one of the examples. And in the cases of CBR, chemical, biological and radiation cases, and maybe even with explosive devices, in short, whenever the technical equipment of the police is not sufficient, the military could help, but it's only to support the police. What are the roles of the police? Like everywhere in the world, the police has a dual function in Germany. It is prevention and law enforcement or prosecution. I will mainly focus on prosecution, but I have to mention that the primary and most important role of the police is to prevent crimes from happening. And it has a very strong impact on the prosecution too. It's a principle of the German police, and certainly of most of the democratic police forces, that prevention takes priority over prosecution whenever the two tasks collide and cause a conflict. In a hostage situation, this is the most famous case when prevention and prosecution collide. For instance, the saving of a hostage's life has certainly priority over the prosecution of the offenders. Better let the offender go for a while and try to get him later than killing the hostage. Those two roles of the police oftentimes create an organizational problem in most of the police forces worldwide. Prosecution is a part of the justice system, which most of the time is under the political head of the Ministry of Justice, and it has its own hierarchical system. Sorry. See my German accent. where the prosecutors do their work. I don't mention at all the role of the courts, as they are independent. They're not a part of the justice prosecution system. They have to fulfill their own independent roles and don't belong to the government's administration. Police, on the other hand, has its own hierarchy, and it is under the political head of a Minister of Interior in some countries, like in Germany, over here directly under the President of the Republic. This dual chain of command, justice system, police system, if I may use those more military terms in this context, may lead to conflicts too. I say may. As all the problems deriving from the fact that there are two masters that exist in most of the democracies can always be solved with reason and common sense. In my country, the legal role of the prosecutors is to be in charge as, let me say, the commander of the prosecution. He is in charge of all legal steps to be taken and supervises them. All operational matters, on the other hand, are merely in the responsibility of the police. To give you a simple example, the prosecutor decides to search certain premises, and the police will decide how to do it, which means how many officers they will use, at what time of the day it will be done, and. I come to a very critical point in the role of law enforcement against terrorism, which many of you may not be aware of, but which law enforcement officers find to be a problem of their daily routine. It is gathering and evaluation of intelligence. There are many reasons for this, and they are both of legal and of operational nature. Intelligence is crucial in counterterrorism for preventing terrorist acts, but for prosecuting offenders too. In this context, I'm talking about intelligence on the identity and capability and intentions of individuals or organizations that might be engaged in terrorism. We have to find information from intelligence on the identity, capability, and intention of